What's going on, folks? Welcome back to the War Room Podcast. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us today. Today we have Shane joining us. We have Ben en route, and then we have Peaches also joining the cast. But it's 6 o'clock, right? We don't want to be late, so we hit the live button, and now we're here. Shane, if you don't mind, man, let the folks know who you are, your background, and then we'll jump right into this bad boy.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So I met Jay through, I did his podcast. I'm a former Australian Army Special Operations Intelligence Analyst. Started on the shooter side, went in, did some contracting in Iraq with the US government, and then came back into our Special Operations, deployed a bunch to Afghanistan, hunting high-value targets as a human operator, and then went into Iraq as the lead analyst hunting senior ISIS leadership from 2014 to 2016. And now I do work with veterans and still do some national security stuff.
That's awesome, Shane. Hey, I appreciate you. Last minute, right? I sent you a text last minute, and you were able to come through for us. So I really appreciate you, Shane. Ben, how you doing, brother?
Hey, good, man. How you doing? Good to be on again, brother. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
Shane, nice to meet
you. Shane's a little delayed, but once he gets it, I'm sure he'll answer you. And then we'll start kicking this thing off. All right. Of course, we all know Nate is in Florida getting ready for the Anti-Hero podcast. So shout out to Nate. I'm sure he'll crush it. Jake is over there at aviation graduation. I hope that's what it is. He's at some type of graduation.
Yeah,
I don't want to butcher it.
I saw the pictures already.
Yeah. So he's at a graduation supporting some awesome young men that are getting ready to become pilots. So he's over there crushing it. In the meantime, Peaches is en route. We'll hold it down until he gets here. Ben, how's everything going with you in business wise, man? I saw some conferences and some other talks that you did the last 2 weeks. They were awesome.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been going well. Just really love what I do, and like I always tell people, I appreciate everyone that I get a chance to work with and lets me do what I love. Lead, teach, motivate, inspire, all those things. And a lot of the times it's funny, but I teach the things I need to know. You know what I mean? And as I get on a roll with all this stuff, it's what I'm, I say teaching people, but really I'm on the journey with everyone I work with, and I need these things to reinforce, you know what I mean, my own self as much as possible and keep me going strong. So I feel like it's a great community and just lucky, very lucky, and I'm passionate about what I do. So it's fantastic, man. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Now, Ben, if anybody wants to watch those talks or whatever, do you record them while you're giving them? Is there a place that they can go find them, or is it mostly Instagram for you?
Yeah, I do. So some of the clips are on Instagram, some are on LinkedIn. I'm gonna start hanging some things. I promised everybody I'm actually gonna get a much more professional YouTube now that I'm with all the A-list pros here on YouTube. And I'm learning the ropes from Jay and Jake and Aaron and Nate. So definitely going to get that going. I will post some of my talks and things like that there. The great thing I'm doing right now is my coaching membership is so much fun. It's great. So I wanted to create something that was really accessible to most people instead of my one-on-one or my corporate stuff, which is, it's an investment. So, but the coaching membership is great. It's, once a month I do a live seminar, session with the members, and they get to do Q&A at the end. I stay as long as they want to talk. So last time it was an hour and 40 minutes or so, about an hour of me teaching things, and then about 40 minutes Q&A. We've got a community that's alive and well, and everyone's supporting each other, and just super cool. I'm really excited about that. So that's all in my Instagram as well. If anyone wants to check that out, I have links for that. And take a look if it makes sense for you. If you like some of that, or you're looking for a place that's a supportive community, and to learn some concepts about mindset and personal growth and planning and execution and all the things that are going to get you from where you are now to where you want to be to make a breakthrough, then definitely please check that out. And if it's not me, it's someone else. But the thing is, you gotta, all the most successful people I've ever worked with, they have coaches, they have mentors, they take courses, they invest in themselves. like I say to people, I'd love it to be me, but if it's not, find someone or something to keep improving yourself. What you feed into your mind, the results show, they crystallize, they materialize in reality for what you put in here, so, and what you consume. So make sure it's good stuff, good for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Shane, you mentioned that you had a nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit about it, and then also let us know when we could come to Australia and hang out for a little bit?
Well, first of all, the invitation's always there. So my nonprofit is called Pegasus Connections, and we do equine-assisted psychotherapy for veterans. We actually get into some modalities of proper CBD, DBT, Gestalt therapy, and work through the emotional process trauma with the veteran. We were just in Ukraine doing it with Ukrainian veterans, and that was through the European Union. We're doing some stuff for the US Department of State. So it's really starting to take off. And then I just do some other stuff because, again, as a veteran that struggled with my post-service career and where do I fit and tribalism and all that, I was the guinea pig, and I just got back home and started working with horses, and it just felt better. And then a lot of my mates started calling me saying, "What are you doing?" I presented at a alternative therapies conference last weekend about medicinal cannabis and psilocybin and stuff, because the Australian medical, we're about 5-10 years behind what is happening in the States. So we're starting to get there. So I just do that. Any veteran cause that wants some advocacy or a bit of mental health help, they usually drop us a line, and I fill into that.
Awesome. Peaches, how you doing, man? I heard you had a little bit of surgery. What'd you get done, and how'd you recover so fast?
Oh, it wasn't surgery. It was just I did have to get put under for a little checkup, if you will.
Gotcha.
The checkup. The checkup.
I don't know I don't know the checkup. Hey, I'm only 40. I just turned 40, so
well, then
that's the type of checkup you're talking about.
Then you're behind. Then I'm pretty sure it's 40 years old. You're supposed to get a little,
Nah, homie. I think I'm keep living without doing that one. I'm good. How's everything else going, Peaches? Tomorrow, based on what Aaron was telling me, is your official day one as a civilian, right?
Yep. Yeah. Today's the last day on active duty. Got up early, went out and crushed my soul on a mountain run, just because I don't want to be some bitch before on my last day of active duty. I want to be able to look on it and go, "Hey, I still got it." So yeah, it's good.
How surreal is it for you? Like, is it hitting? Because I know, like, all of us on the panel at some point, I was talking to Aaron about this earlier, and it's like, even like till this day, there's times where I'm sitting around and I'm just like, holy fuck, I survived 20 years of that shit. Like, how surreal is it for you?
It's like I'm going to miss it. Like, let's be real. I've had an amazing career. I've met amazing people. I've gotten a chance to do some amazing things. So I'm going to miss it for sure. Is it the right time? Like, just at least for me and the family? Yeah, it's the right time. If I could keep doing what I was doing for another 10 years without, all the other things that are involved with that, then I absolutely would. I've been super happy today, and for a bunch of different things. Like, everything's going great. I was on a live earlier, and sun and weather is incredible here in Las Vegas. And like I said yesterday, and Shane, I know you were talking about some alternative medicine there, by the sounds of it, and I got a chance to get put on some ketamine before going under, and it was an incredible experience, like incredible. So, man, I'm feeling great right now.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully that feeling continues, my friend, and because I know, again, that post-service depression is real. So hopefully the feeling that you're feeling right now carries on with you for years and years to come, man. Can't say the same about, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but like, I think that's why these things are so important, right? So I've got Aaron, I've got Trent, right, on One's Ready. I occasionally get to hop on here with you gentlemen, and it's just, you know, it's still, is it the team room that we all know? No,
Yeah.
right? You know, because things aren't being recorded there, and you can get real wild, right? And you can also get up and hug your homies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like sometimes
Yeah.
you got to hug the homies, and you know, but this is the next best thing, really.
Yeah. Like Ben was saying earlier, just the power of community. That shit goes a long way, man. Because even, you know, being on YouTube when I first started, it was just me making content, and then I found Jake, and then I found you guys, and it's just 10 times better because you're around like-minded people that are achieving at the highest level, and it just pushes you to be better, and it just brings a sense of normalcy to your life, right? Because when you are out after what you just did and you're running around town, people are looking at you crazy when you're, you know, pieing around trucks and sitting in the corner facing the door and all sorts of crazy shit. But now that, you know, you're out and you get to talk to other people that understands that feeling and that understand what you've been through, it just goes a long way. Regardless of what your community looks like, you definitely need to find one because it's definitely helpful.
For sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
That is
it's
for
funny
sure.
you say that, Jay. When I first got out, I was doing some terrorism work with our government, and I'd go in a room and clear it and sit with my back. I was doing all those things I had no idea. And one day we're in a case conference talking about some of the PTSD, and they're all looking at me going, "How don't you know this?" And I go, "Why would I know it?" They're like, "You've got it, mate. Like you're always on edge. You're hyper vigilant." And I'm like, "No, this is just me." Yeah, well, you need to tone it down to about 1,000. So you just don't know that we operate at a different level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell you what, all right, so we have a super chat, so we'll hit that, and then we'll talk about Zelensky and the debacle that took place in the White House. Let me find this super chat.
That was so awesome.
Some wild stuff, man.
It was so awesome. That's what I voted for.
Oh man, all right, let me see if I can find that super chat since
I've got it right here, Jay. It's
yeah,
from
if you don't
Mason
mind
Young.
firing it off. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
don't
it's
mind
from
firing it off.
Mason Young. For Shane, do you like koala bears or kangaroos better?
Given that all koala bears have an STD, kangaroos.
Oh,
How the hell do you know that they have
Yeah,
STDs,
so
Shane?
all koalas have chlamydia.
How do you know this? That like who went out
Everyone
and
in
tested
Australia
that
knows
theory?
it. Like, well, so because some people years ago started getting sick, and then they did blood tests because they're in zoos, and through a few bushfires, they actually became endangered. And in that process, they realised that they all have chlamydia. And all they do is they'll eat eucalyptus, which gets them stoned. Then they sleep 18 hours a day. And they are a lot bigger than you think.
is
Dude,
that
that's-
kind of
I
like
do remember
the,
working with...
is that kind of like the hares in the UK where they all have some kind of type of chlamydia or hepatitis or something like that?
Yeah, our Tasmanian devils have cancer too. A lot of them have a rot in their mouth, so they're building a completely separate population away from them, free in case that happens. So there's a number of, because of habitat decline, they're getting so small that DNA diversity is not as rampant as it was years ago. So I think a lot of those kind of animals are getting those diseases.
Gotcha. And again, folks in the chat, just bear with us. There is a small delay, but again, we're gonna get the job done. Hopefully, it's not too much of a hassle for you guys. But yeah, we'll jump into our first story. I'm gonna read it off, and Aaron, if you can cue up the video, I'll read the actual article, and then we could watch the video and see how that unfolds. All right. So today, President Donald Trump and Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky met in the Oval Office for a highly anticipated discussion aimed at addressing the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The meeting, however, quickly escalated into a heated confrontation, leading to the abrupt cancellation of planned mineral deal and joint press conference. All right, let's watch the exchange, and then we'll go Ben, we'll go Peaches, and then we'll hit Shane last since he has some direct knowledge of what took place. Go ahead, Aaron.
On the air with breaking news, it appears talks between the U.S. and Ukraine have broken down after a tense and combative day at the White House, and a planned news conference for this afternoon has just been canceled, we've learned. A short time ago, President Trump posting on social media saying, in part, I have determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved. And he goes on to write, he disrespected the United States of America and its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky left the White House after meetings with President Trump in an attempt to persuade the administration to continue backing Ukraine's ongoing war with Russia. But in the Oval Office earlier, Zelensky clashed with Mr. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. It was an astonishingly hostile exchange, the pair yelling at him about his, quote, attitude and whether or not he was grateful for U.S. support. Here's some of what truly happened.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's back to you, far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No.
Right. So what does that mean, right? There's another clip, Aaron, if you can play that, and then we'll go from there. But dude, just watching this, it's like your elders like talking down to you, and you're just in the corner, just cowering. It's funny. All right, let's check out.
I will say that. All right, we'll see what we can do about putting it together. We'll see. I don't make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy, and I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave, but you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing.
That is fucking Ben, please kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there, right? So there's a lot there. I think, first of all, just strategically, what President Trump is saying, he's right. I mean, he's right about it. And the same thing J.D. Vance is saying as well, too. And that's, and that he's coming in there, hat in his hands. He should be hat in his hands, trying to get support and trying to get aid. But instead, he's coming in with expectations and also coming in with an attitude that this is just taken for granted, because President Trump said it very well. He's good at communicating these things. He has a long memory of, hey, I'm enabling you to be a tough guy. Even decorum. I'll even just go to decorum. And someone asked him later, why aren't you wearing a suit? I mean, I thought it was a little bit immature, but then I talked about it a little bit and thought about it more and thought, President Eisenhower, all the generals in World War II, when they went to see a world leader, they wore their military suit. And if you look at some of the meetings of, like some of the major meetings between world powers in World War II, they are wearing suits, so I can see if he's in his first year of war, second year, and so on, but it's been going on for a long time now. And you're coming to, frankly, the highest power in the land. You're asking for things. You have a lot of big asks for a country that has voted President Trump back in office, and they knew what he was going to do and the reforms he's going to make and the plans and programs and all the things he's going to do, which is, really an America first type agenda. And you don't come in with the highest level of decorum, the highest level of respect, listen. Instead, you're trying to put on a show in front of the media. And against President Trump, this is never going to work. Every time you're in negotiations, so one of the things I teach with a lot of my leaders and the people I coach and I work with, I teach negotiations as well, too. And one of the things, you have to understand the interests of the party you're working with. And if one of the interests is a process interest, and if you end up trying to make President Trump look anything but number one and less than where he wants to be, he's going to fight you and knock you down. And so is his whole team. So it has to come in with the right approach. First of all, upholding his, his own support and his own, the way his people see him, his brand, and the way people see him, he sees himself. Otherwise, he's going to fight that and knock that down every time. So I just think right off the bat, coming in with decorum, the approach, the argumentativeness, talking over him, things like that. I don't know what he was thinking. I think he got used to that with President Biden, or he got used to everyone kind of really, really just carte blanche supporting anything he said, because, again, the idea that your country was invaded, we have to do whatever is possible. Yes, but at a certain point, our own people in our own country have many problems. We got homeless people like you wouldn't believe. We got all these issues. We got all these programs. We got, our airports and everything, our roads, our bridges, all these things like that. And granted, it's a terrible thing when a country's at war. But, at some point, President Trump, I thought the most important point he made was, you're playing with World War III. That slaps you right in the face, because you realize that if we don't get this right, and I will tell you, there's some political theorists and strategists who say that World War III has already started. It's already started. We don't know the future yet, but all the trend lines, everything's in place for World War III to be here. So again, I know we do have some heavy hitters that watch our show and that will watch it later, and I will get messages. So please tell me what you think about that. But that is what I've heard in the DC area from people that, are full-time professionals and all this, that World War III is already on its way. And if we don't right the ship, if we don't get this right, it'll come faster than we want it to. Okay. Or we still have a chance to prevent it. We still have a chance to stop it. But if we keep going the way we're going, they're saying it's a foregone conclusion. So when he said that, that really personally for me hit me in the face. And I thought, it seems a little harsh at first, but the way he was talking over the president, the decorum's wrong. You don't know the other party. And anytime you're dealing with anyone in negotiations, anytime you want to get something done, you don't win people over by talking over them, especially when you're in a lower position and you're asking for things. You don't have the cards, like you said. You have no negotiating leverage other than making someone look bad, which it doesn't anymore. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Oh, I agree with that. And I think it's kind of telling that the Ukrainian, and there's no way I could pronounce this word, but essentially their parliament has gone into an emergency session to impeach him. That's telling alone.
Yeah.
And then I saw another video of the ambassador to Ukraine just sitting there like, oh, you could just see the kind of like, oh, this is getting bad. This is getting ugly. And I agree with everything you said, Ben. I think they've taken the piss for way too long. And this is, and I know that people are going to say, oh, well, he's not acting, Trump is not acting presidential, but you know what? I need somebody who's strong, and we've dealt with
he was, I thought he
somebody who's not strong.
Commander in chief.
Right. And essentially what Trump did was knife hand him. It was like, I don't care.
100%.
He straight up, boom, this is what's going on. And, I don't know if the viewers or even you guys know, but like my wife is English, right? So everything that we essentially watch on TV is British TV. And it's wild to see the contrast between, American media and at least the British media, Sky News, BBC, and that kind of stuff. And the headlines are just, Trump loses it and he's outraged and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, man, I don't think that's what is happening. And you know what, even if you do take that Trump was yelling at him, like, again, I voted for it. I'm here for it. That's my opinion. Though.
2 more quick saved rounds, if you don't mind, Jay, if I can just jump in.
Sure.
Number one, I have it on some good authority that, a country that's been a major help to Ukraine as well, too, with Poland taking in so many refugees. The people can't stand that Zelensky won't try to make a deal, because what happens next, this is going to all pour over and keep pouring over to other countries. But then, moreover, does everybody know what Zelensky's job was before he was president? At one point he was a comedian, right? So, President Trump's right. You're playing this role of the tough guy in some ways. Granted, he's a president at war. I understand that. Horrible things in his country. He has to act strong. I understand that. He has to act strong. But again, if you blow the meeting, that's like when your team leader, or let's say your company commander or someone, goes to a meeting to get stuff for the team. You're like, man, you got to do it. Go in there. And they blow it. How's everybody in the team? Like, dumbass, you had one job. You're not here to be the tough guy. That's my job. I'm the badass. You're going in there to make something happen, and you blew the meeting. We didn't get our stuff.
How do you sit across President Trump after doing that and expect to freaking tell him what you're gonna do? Ben, please continue.
I mean but that's it. Aaron, thank you so much. So then, Aaron, by the way, this is pretty badass action you got going on here. This is really good, really on fire, man. But like,
Shane?
I mean, next level.
Sorry.
But that's it. That's it. I mean, exactly that. He's a comedian. I mean, I think he's forgetting himself at some point that, like, yes, you've been playing this role really well, and obviously, you know, I haven't been a president of a country at war. So you know what I mean? I'm saying from my vantage point, you blew the negotiation. You have a chance to do what President Trump's plan is and keep fighting or create peace or something, but you can get knocked off the table now. I mean, you think Putin's done? Get knocked off the table, man. So,
Shane?
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of different and a little bit better insight in some ways. So I was in Ukraine in 2014 with our special operations. The Russian separatists shot down a Malaysian Airlines flight that had 80 Australians on it that we had to go and repatriate the bodies. So my role was to go into those areas and conduct threat assessments and stuff. So even back then, they were at a war where a lot of the places that Russia took immediately back then. So this isn't a new concept. This has been going on for what they now call the coup of 14. So it wasn't like it wasn't expected. There was always a flot and a bit of a back and forth. Most recently, last week, you know, my nonprofit, we were in Ukraine working with veterans, and there was two leaders that are amputees from the Battle of Bakhmut. And they're like, I'm getting a prosthetic. I'm going back to the front line. If Zelensky didn't do what he did today, he doesn't go home. Everyone in Ukraine are prepared to fight to the death. This is like France in 1914, for like France in 1938. We can sit here and say this, and I've argued with my partner who does a lot. I can send you photos of her having doing some therapy sessions with Ukrainian veterans. They are all their biggest threat or their biggest trauma. They can't go back to the front line. Everyone in Ukraine constantly lives under the threat of Russian UAV attack, Russian missile attack, no matter where you are in Ukraine. So even Kiev, they have this like an app where they get warnings, take cover, take shelter. So to the Ukrainians, they will not allow Russia to keep going. So that gets lost in a lot of Zelensky's rhetoric. He's doing, and I didn't believe it until I heard it from veterans, amputees, Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine saying, no, we will never give up. We will never stop. So that's one of why Zelensky's got to do that. If he doesn't have a job back home. And everyone knows that. The other thing I think a lot of people forget and that aren't familiar with the Lend-Lease Act. So you can Google this. This is all public knowledge. A lot of what Ukraine is getting is actually to be paid back to the US. Just like in World War II, all the munitions and money that the US gave the UK was a loan. And they didn't pay it back until like the late 90s, I think. This is where the mineral deal comes in. Trump's going, we'll scrap all the Lend-Lease loan that you'll be in debt for the US for like 100 years. We'll get profit sharing now of these minerals. And this is where Zelensky's getting himself into trouble. Instead of saying, hey, that's excellent for my country, we're out of debt immediately, our GDP is going to go through the roof. This is where he's getting too much in front of his skates. Yeah, there it is. So, and the other thing that is, I agree 1,000,000%, wear a suit, brother. You're a president going to meet a president. You're going to the White House. Wear a suit. Like, I get if you're on the front line, but no, you own a suit. So he was a comedian who got famous playing the role of the comedian who became president, and that's becoming real now. And he's in front of his skis. So I think he's got to do what he did today. I think JD Vance was the biggest gangster in that room. If you watch the full thing, he just came straight over the top and ripped into Zelensky. He is the next president. He is awesome.
Yeah.
100%.
Now, Now, Shane, what are your thoughts about, because you mentioned the Ukrainians are ready to keep going. Now, as war fighters, we understand that it takes a big person, it takes a leader to make the hard decisions and say, look, this war has to end. Think about World War II after the fucking atomic bomb, right? The Japanese emperor was like, you know what, this has to end, or else my people are going to suffer. At what point do you think somebody in Ukraine is going to raise their hand and say, hey, this has to end? Because if we, the United States, pull support away, like fucking Ukraine, if they choose to keep going, Russia's just going to steamroll right over them. If it wasn't for us helping them, like they would be fucking done. So what are your thoughts on this? Like, do you think this is going to end?
So World War II is the perfect example, because a lot of historians and the US said at the time, we used the atomic bombs because the whole of Japan had been raised as a militia to defend Japan from US invasion. And that was one of the strategic thoughts in that process. So this time around, you look at Poland, you look at Germany. Trump said in his first term, NATO have to lift their game defense spending. It's taken this invasion for them to now do that. Germany didn't have an army until 2 years ago. They're now building an army up. The other thing that's happening right now, and it's again, if you Googled NATO military technology capability, they're using Ukraine as a live battle space for R&D. What is working against, because we've seen the capability of the UAVs and counter UAVs and the HIMARS, because this is really China's watching, saying, if we invade Thailand or Taiwan and America do this, can we defend it? So let's give Russia some of these weapons. And NATO are saying, well, if America pull out and Russia do invade and keep coming at us, do these weapons counter that? So that's the other problem that's going on, and why a lot of the European countries don't want it to end. And if you look at the HIMARS strike now, they're hitting logistics supply bases behind the lines. They're trying to take out, Russia had about 6,000 tanks at the start of the war. They've got about 2,000 old tanks left. They're trying to wear those tanks down. So there's a lot of geopolitics in the second and third order going on that they don't want Ukraine to stop, because it's in their best interest. So again, this is where Zelensky's got to do what he's got to do, because the Europeans, the Germans, and the NATO, they don't want, because they know that as soon as their threat, their GDPs, everything's got to go up. That's a massive issue that's also being played out behind closed doors. As far as World War III, 100% World War III is going on. It's a fifth generation war. We're fighting in cyber. We're fighting in the grey area, grey zone combat all through the world. So yes, it might not be conventional nuclear like World War II, but we are 1,000% fighting World War III right now. That's what BRICS is about.
And I think jumping back in on this too, I think one of the things, again, about the leader making the tough call is that, yeah, everybody wants to fight to the death, but again, the strategic leader has to be able to shape and share a vision and articulate what a victory looks like. So it's not a Pyrrhic victory. If you win the war but kill the country, or if you win this battle but kill the country, you're eventually going to lose. What do you come back to? So I mean, the Pyrrhic battle, where in ancient Greece, where they could never fight again, they were destroyed after it. And I think one of the things that I think President Trump and strategists generally, hopefully President Trump, but his surrounding circle around him, definitely I think JD Vance, but other strategists would know about, is that eventually kingdoms, empires, great empires, great countries fall if they bleed blood and treasure long enough. So the long wars of Rome made Rome fall. The Visigoths, all those things like that. The constant warfare outside of Rome crushed Rome. How did Rome defeat Hannibal and Carthage? Was through its taxation system, its ability to raise armies. But then it became itself overtaxed, and eventually the empire falls over time because you can't recoup those losses. So I think we have to be students of history and looking at these things, and I think that's what we're trying to do. Look at the long game. Where does this take us? And especially if we're going to World War III, now American blood is also being spilled. Our treasure's already being spilled, but now American blood. The next thing, I mean, I would just offer a counter, an alternative look at why we dropped the bombs in World War II. Yes, definitely because Japan had mobilized. That's a reason, but a less known reason is we were sending a message to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union scared the shit out of us And, we were already, I don't believe X had been published yet, the famous analysis of the Soviet Union and all its powers, but really we dropped those bombs and say, hey, look what we can do. And it was a just cause to drop them. We had reason to. That's even debatable, me saying a just cause to do it, but it was, that was a big reason to say, hey, look who's on the block here. Look who's number one. Look what we can do. Don't start invading Europe, because that was the next fear, right? As Russia, Soviet Union switched sides. Yeah. And then I think to Shane's point about geopolitics, if you look at Stratfor, people that really watch geopolitics, there's a huge fear of a rearming Germany. Okay. Everybody wants the original boogeyman to come back. The last thing you want is a scared Germany in the face of Russia. I'm just saying, everyone can say, oh, they changed now. Have they? Okay. Have you seen what's going on? Have you seen what's happening with the far right taking over election seats? Yep. Take a look at what's going on there. I mean, then the diasporas there aren't making it any better with some of these attacks and things. So you want to have a scared Germany rearming, and they add massive amounts of GDP to making a strong army again. Geopolitics, people that watch geopolitics, especially Stratfor, will talk about every 100 years, Germany needs to have some type of expansion. We're getting right there again. We're getting close, okay? And this is the powder keg. And I think there are probably a lot of people whispering in the administration's ear and President Trump's ear, and hopefully he's tuning into the war room and going to get the real straight dope on all this. Guys, we're steering world politics right now as we speak. But I just wanted to add a couple things in there. Had a couple save rounds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no doubt, but
go ahead,
100% right, especially about the counter Russia, which was the biggest fear, for the US at the time, and it was noted at the Potsdam conference. And you're 100% right about Germany, where they are right now in the far right. It's out of control what's going on in Europe. Yeah. But Trump knows all this. That's why he just wants it done. He doesn't want it to drag on it, and that's what he keeps saying in his comments. I want the die, and it gets. If it was anyone else saying it but Trump, everyone would hear it. But people have their own thoughts, which annoys me. But he just says, let's get the dying to stop and let's end the war. That's his key points. And I'm all on board for that.
Now, a world war is defined as a large-scale global conflict involving multiple nations across different continents, typically including world's major military power. These wars significantly impact international politics, economies, and societies, right? So key events that are going on right now that we, can technically say that we're within a World War III like scenario. So you have Russia, Ukraine, right? Then you have Israel-Hamas conflict. Then you have tensions between China and Taiwan. All right. Then you have the US/Iran proxy conflicts that are also going on. And then, of course, you have all the cyber attacks that no one is, safe from. Now, last week, you three weren't on the panel, so I'd be curious as far as you guys' thoughts on this. President Trump started speaking with Russia about ending this conflict and completely left Vladimir Zelensky and Ukraine out of the picture. Do you think that's going to be a thing going forward, especially after witnessing what you guys just witnessed as far as them trying to end this? We can start with you, Peaches, and then we'll go to Ben, and then we'll hit Shane.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think Trump said something as he was leaving, saying, "Hey, don't come back until you're ready to talk about peace." And I based off of today and all other conversations, I have every reason to believe that Trump absolutely means that. And also, I think for a negotiation like that, you would talk to the aggressor first, separate from it's almost like kids, right? You have an older brother and a younger brother, and they're fighting. You separate them. You go in there and you're like, dude, you're older, you know what you're doing, like you're stronger, you're like WTF, dude, right? And then you try and negotiate from that side, and then you go to the younger kid or the weaker one, the one that's getting picked on, and you go like, hey man, maybe you don't antagonize, or maybe you're pestering him, stop pushing his buttons, and then you come up to some kind of agreement. You don't have them all in the same room at the same time. And the fact that he's so butthurt about like, well, you should have either one, talk to me first, or who the fuck do you think you are?
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're the one that's losing right here. Like, seriously, I mean, it's you are the weaker one. You're losing. Sorry, man. Like, I'm gonna go talk to the person, try and stop the bleeding first, and I'm gonna plug the hole, and then I'll try and figure everything else out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in next. It's just I think a seasoned diplomat, a seasoned negotiator knows you don't bring all the parties together until you have some type of, precursor, some cursory agreement, something to go off of. Otherwise, you're just gonna be screaming at each other, shouting, making threats. You're gonna storm out, waste time. So, I mean, there's backdoor diplomacy, there's secret meetings, all kinds of things that happen, but you're trying to move towards a common objective, and that's again, Trump's goal to stop the bullets from flying, stop people from dying first. Let's stop the hemorrhaging, stop the dying, and then see if we can move to a negotiated agreement that makes sense for everyone. But I mean, the fact that it just shows that how limited his experience is in statecraft. I mean, he's experienced in fighting a war with a country, no doubt about it. Again, I'm not, I never like to act like someone that's like, not giving him his credit where credit's due, right? I mean, he stayed in the country, stayed in the city when it looked like they were going to fall immediately. Hats off to him, badass right there. But you have to also know when, as you said, Shane, you're out in front of your skis a bit, and defer a little bit to the seasoned negotiators on the global stage, on the world stage, not just in your country, but and try to figure out, understand what their process is and why it's the right process. I mean, because getting everyone in the room, just like you're saying, is only going to cause more conflict, probably counterproductive. And I think having some of the initial meetings to get people to the table, and again, the only time they might come to the final table is when it's already understood, it's agreed upon, we're going to finish this, because it's probably going to be too contentious to bring everyone together and negotiate it out. This is really President Trump playing the role of like a Secretary of State, like George Shultz, having that diplomacy with having the parties separated and shuttling back and forth until you can get an agreement done.
Shane?
There's a very good movie called 13 Days that goes behind the Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it shows you the amount of diplomacy behind the scenes. So you can imagine what's going on at NATO, with the US ambassadors. That's why he sent a delegation straight away. He called both parties on the phone. His book's Art of the Deal. Like, Trump knows how to get these things done. And so we're getting snippets. Some of the media who don't like him are writing stories that are just incorrect. And, there's a lot more vested in this than just Ukraine, as much as it's bad and it's their country. Russia are only trying to get through Ukraine. Like, Ukraine's a security block, buffer zone between Mother Russia and NATO. Like, so that's one of the other things. Will he stop? Will he continue going? Is Poland safe? What's Belarus doing? Like, there's a lot of countries. Take the US out. This is how every world war started. They went country to country, annexed, then they built their forces up. Hitler said he wasn't going to Poland until he went to Poland. So that's Europe's also thinking about that. This is European history. Like you said, we're to learn from our history. This happens all through Europe, and that's what the European leaders are thinking about, which is why I got to again say Trump just wants it over, because you guys have got a southern border fight. You guys are also dealing with China and Taiwan. We're dealing with we're dealing with Iran. We're dealing with Israel and all what's going on in the Middle East, and oil prices and BRICS. And this is one of probably 6 or 7 of Trump's fights, and he just wants to get it done.
Now, how do you guys think Putin receive what he saw in the White House? Do you guys think he's sitting back, licking his chops like,
Damn.
yeah, you know what I mean? Or do you guys think he's also optimistic and he also just wants it to fucking come to an end? Right? Do you guys think now he sees weakness and he's going to pounce because he thinks that the U.S. is going to sit on the sideline and watch things happen? Or do you think he still have too much respect for President Trump and he's going to sit back and just kind of like he's also ready to end it also?
I just really quick, I think that if he's a student of human behavior and probably knows he has the big dog in there. I mean, honestly, President Trump is displaying real leadership, and anybody can debate with me whatever they want, but this, he's stepping out front and he's very strong with his beliefs. I think Putin would not want to test him, because I 100% don't think he wants to test him. I think he's more than happy to let President Trump negotiate something and state what he wants and state what his positions are, his interests. Again, in negotiations, we look at the party's interests and we try to meet as many of the interests as possible. And that's how you get a negotiated agreement done, instead of staying at war, whether it's in business war or in real war. And so I think he sees him as someone who, President Trump, is a businessman, and he could put his interests forth, and probably with that strength, he's not going to want to test it. That's my opinion. I don't think so.
Yeah, I tell you what, there's a book out there called 48 Laws of Power. Zelensky needs to read that shit before he goes to the White House again, because I think what he did just now was put Ukraine in a very bad position to where they might possibly lose an ally in the United States, and that's the last thing they want. And at the end of the day, as war fighters, like we all know, man, like when countries are at war, the citizens of that country, like that's who suffers the price. We're war fighters. That's what we signed up for, right? Like we expect to get shot at. We accept the fact that we might not come back home. That's fine. But it's the citizens of Afghanistan, Iraq, the United States, the loved ones. That's who pays the price, you know? So, and again, true leaders, all they should want to do is fucking end it as soon as possible to safeguard human life. Peaches, I know we have a super chat that we completely ignored for the last 30 minutes.
No, I'm on it. I'm on it. It's not a question. It's just from New Bob Dole. Exactly. Ukraine has become the Spanish Civil War 2.0. So
yeah,
if you know your history, I'd agree with that.
That shit has to come to an end. Do we have any more super chats? Or we good? Shane, go ahead.
Trump did this to our prime minister the day before, and he's done it previously. So this isn't just Zelensky. Like, this is Trump, his MO. If you Google like Trump Prime Minister Turnbull, he did the same thing to our prime minister. He did it yesterday. We've got a nuclear submarine deal, AUKUS, Australia, UK, US. Trump's like, what's that about? Well, I'll get to that later. Like, it's not just Zelensky. This is Trump putting America first and American interest. And that's what he got elected to do. So good on him.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know.
Absolutely.
I thought I saw a super chat come across about Putin. Is that we teeing that one up?
It must be a new one.
Yeah,
it must be a new one.
I agree. Does he seem crooked? I mean, of course. I mean, I think you're spot on. He's. Oh, okay.
I gotcha.
Okay.
I gotcha. Yeah. It was just a comment.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Is he crooked? I mean, I think you're 100% right. Is he crooked? Yes, crooked, dangerous, everything you can imagine. But he's in charge of one of the largest, most powerful arsenals in the world. So we got to deal with him.
But initially, and a guy, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because Shane, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. Same with Ben and Peaches. But this whole conflict initially started because the threat of Ukraine joining NATO and NATO constantly pushing and encroaching on the Russian border. If this thing comes to an end, like, what would be a solution that makes sense, right? Ukraine stays out of NATO. NATO fucking stays where they're at. Because again, like, I've studied this a little bit whenever it first started, just because I had buddies in 10th group that were going over there. And I know we talked about this before. Putin, during the first administration, Putin was just being forced into a position to where he had to act, right? NATO, after, I think it was World War II, they drew a line and say, hey, we're not going to go past this line, Russia. Like, we're going to stop fucking with you. And it's like that line just kept getting closer and closer and closer. And it just kept getting pushed and pushed to the point where he was like, dude, come on now. I'm a man. I got fucking balls. Like, quit testing me, you know, or else. It's like going to a bar with your girl and then some random dude just keeps hitting on her, just punking you and expecting you not to fucking do anything, right? Eventually, you're going to be like, all right, enough is enough, dude. Like, what the fuck? Shane, we'll go to you with this one because I know you've studied this in depth, and then I'll get some feedback from Ben and Peaches. Like, what are your thoughts about why this shit started in the first place, how it's going to end, and if you were Putin, like, what would you do?
So there's a couple of things. During the Clinton presidency, he actually came up with a doctrine of NATO, of Ukraine joining NATO. When that was one of the things that got Yeltsin out. When Putin came in, his opening address, he said, I am going to restore Mother Russia. So he's never hidden his annex of Georgia, his annex of these areas. He's never hidden at Crimea. His plan has always been from day one, I'm going to rebring and restore Mother Russia. She's a nationalist. The NATO part, you're 100% right. They keep encroaching on his border, and he's like, at some point, there's a threat to me and my standing. And then he saw an easy win. But like I said, in 2014, when I was in Ukraine, there was already a counterinsurgency operations going on in southern Donetsk and in Crimea and those areas, because they're Russian speaking. They're not Ukrainian speaking. They're Russian. So it was, and it'll, in my opinion, from everything, history, research, speaking to people on both sides, the flot's going to pretty much stay where it is. The Russian-speaking Ukrainians will stay Russian Ukrainians or Russians, and Ukraine will have what they've got now. Crimea is the bit of the talking point. What will happen with Crimea, because that was kind of, they call it the Black Annex. Russian side just turned up, essentially Spetsnaz and KGB in civil uniforms and just took it over. It wasn't like even an armed incursion. So that'll, and the other question will be, Britain, France, and a few other countries have offered up peacekeepers along the front, or I don't know, like a demilitarized zone like we see in Korea. The Russians are saying, we're not having NATO troops on our border. So that's one of the negotiation pieces that's got to work out, because the Ukrainians are like, well, what's stopping you rebuilding your army? And in 5 years, you're doing it again. So this is what's being fought out by your Pete Hegseths and your Marco Rubios and the politics behind the scenes of what is a safe, everyone saves face peace deal inside Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember too that really this goes back to 2004, 2005, the Orange Revolution, when, you know, the former pro-Russia government, and I think it was Viktor Yanukovych, something like that, was basically lost in a rigged election. What they said, the election was rigged, and again, this is what they're saying. But when the Orange Revolution occurred, and this pro-Russia president that had huge support for Russia, huge polls for Vladimir Putin, and all of a sudden they lost this buffer space, right? The buffer space was always very important to Russia and to the Soviet Union strategically. So they lost Ukraine. They had lost, I mean, whether it's, you know, nuclear weapons and major aviation manufacturing facilities, all these different things that were, once the Soviet Union fell apart, they still had so much influence in I'd say, quote unquote, control within Ukraine. But then once that regime was toppled to the Orange Revolution, as Shane was saying, Vladimir Putin became obsessed with getting this back that was considered part of Mother Russia. It was considered historically Russian, and they, you know, a Russian territory, and they would stop at nothing for this. But really all the way back then, and it never got any better until things heated up in 2014. He decided just to annex Crimea and go from there. But again, going all the way back to 2004, 2005, the Orange Revolution, that's where I personally, I think that was a big spark, and that fire began burning then. And he began laying plans. And actually, for years, if you guys probably remember reading sit-reps, things like that, for years, they were doing major offensive feints with their army every year, having an exercise to practice the invasion. They were doing it for years. And then finally, they did it. They just didn't stop, right? So everyone became numb to it. They're just doing it again. They're just doing it again. This time, like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, shit, boss, they're going. So, and that was that. And obviously, there was a big stockpiling. I'm making it very simplified, but there was a big stockpiling of an Iron Mountain and supplies and ammunition, more than for any exercise, before they actually made that push as well. So,
yeah. And honestly, I have nothing really to add to that, because it's actually, Ben and Shane, you guys are way smarter on this than me. But I do have to throw out a super chat that we just got from New Bob Dole again. I hate the NATO expansion argument. Putin is trying to reform Imperial Russia's boundaries, and people whose ancestors died to Russians choose NATO.
I tell you what, though, with us being at the helm, like with the United States as powerful as it is right now, with the right people in charge, Putin will never be able to do this. Because I was watching a documentary the other day just about World War I and World War II, because my son is really into that right now. So I'm listening to all these different things, and I'm learning a lot of things that I didn't know about. And I can honestly say, like, during World War I and World War II, like, had Europe had strong leaders, like, that shit would have never happened. Because it's like you have Germany and all these other states just taking over territory, and people were just ignoring them and letting them do it, right? Whether it's France, the UK, and some of these other countries, they're just letting Europe and Russia, or not Europe, but Germany and some of these other countries just take over territory, and they're reacting when it's way too late. That shit happening now. Had, you know, we had President Trump in office whenever Russia came in, I don't think that shit would have happened to begin with. So, yeah, Putin wants to do it, but I don't think it's going to happen with the United States as powerful as it is right now. What are you guys' thoughts, Ben?
No, I mean, I think you're right about that. Not let it happen, but we got to think about the cost. Again, what I said before stands, that yes, we can win any war. We can stomp the crap on everybody, but what's the cost? Blood and treasure. And at what point do we start fracturing our own country? Because here's the thing. I mean, just like I had talked before, the other day I was on Nate's podcast. We were talking about the mandate of heaven within China, and that the biggest concern that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has is with the internal security of the country, internal stability. The 700 million impoverished Chinese is their concern. It's not external. Everything they do is focused to keeping control of the country, because when they get shattered by wars and famine over and over, and they lose blood and treasure, then that's when you get the overturning of the government, the country fractures. It's no different for a lot of places like that. So if we get into a series of big wars and our own country suffers internally and we don't take care of things, I mean, not that I see the fracturing occurring as much, but it really puts us in a bad way to where there will be some political upheaval. So what's the cost that we say we're going to stop him? So if you can get ahead of it, create peace, create a deal. Yes, okay, yes, he did invade. Yes, it's not good. Yes, it's horrible. But if we get into just realpolitik and we look at protecting our interests, and the number one interest of any country is the physical security and economic prosperity of its citizens as well too, and of the country and the citizens, then you have to. I mean, this is where President Trump is at, right? The rubber meets the road. It's no more talking, no more, wishful thinking. Someone else is going to do it. He's got to make something happen, because otherwise, if we get into a big war, now Americans are dying, more people are dying, Europeans are dying. The economic system is getting attacked. It's going to be fractured. Meanwhile, China's just sitting there, getting fat and happy and stronger. And people probably don't realize it unless you're a student of China. They're trying to create an alternative economic system. You got to realize this. One of my friends is a professor at NDU, Professor Jill Goldenziel. She's a contributor to Forbes and writes these great articles. But she put something out the other day. China's sending boats out and cutting the undersea cables to ruin the internet. They're testing this to see if they can make you go black. And there's nothing you can do about it. And they're like, oh, sorry, wait, we didn't know. They know. They know how to blow down the satellites too. So, I mean, meanwhile, if we get involved in this, someone else is getting strong. So we have two fronts to be very careful about. And I think that's why the urgency he feels to get this thing to stop.
Absolutely. Shane, you have anything to
add? They just arrested a Chinese boat in Europe for doing that undersea cable thing, right? So the other key piece is that, and I guarantee it'll come out in the next 36 hours in Europe. On December the 5th, 1994, the US gave Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan safety and security agreements if they gave up their nuclear weapons, which all three did. So that's part of the issue now. Ukraine and these countries had nuclear weapons when the Soviet Union collapsed. They gave them up to be non-nuclear on the condition that that the US, UK, and France would always have their back if Russia invaded. And so, again, this is why I agree 1,000,000%. You've got to understand your history. Like, there's some countries are relying on agreements that may have been signed 10, 20, 30 years ago, and that's the backbone. And whether Zelensky's aware of that or not, I know there's people in Ukraine that are, and they're saying, hang on, they threatened nuclear war on us. We gave our right up to do the same because you said you would have our backs.
Right,
and
very true.
The fall of Afghanistan is still bitter in some people's minds. Hang on, they turned their back on them. Are they doing it to us? And that's, I'm too much a fan and have worked with too many amazing US servicemen to believe that that's going to happen again, or that's going to be the outstart. I think that there's a deal is going to be done.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, Shane, Ben, and Peaches. You guys are well versed in this topic. I'm just here listening, right? So if we don't have any super chats, guys, we'll transition to the next topic. Shane, you hit on this a little bit, the fall of Afghanistan, right? So President Donald Trump has urged Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to dismiss all generals involved in the previous administration's flawed Afghanistan withdrawal. All right, during a recent cabinet meeting, when questioned about the status of those generals, Hegseth confirmed that the Department of Defense is conducting a review to ensure full accountability. The chaotic evacuation in August 2021 resulted in the deaths of 13 U.S. service members, left American citizens and allies behind, and abandoned billions of dollars in military equipment. Trump emphasized that the need for the Taliban to return to the need for the Taliban to return U.S. military equipment left the withdrawal, alleging that the group profited from selling the abandoned assets. Right. And I completely understand this, and I completely support it. What are you guys' thoughts? We'll start with you, Ben, because you're the voice of reasoning on this podcast. Because targeting generals, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a fine line? Is it something that we should be doing? Is it retaliation? Like, what's your thoughts?
I mean, just my own thoughts, right? I've got a football background, and so you know where I'm going to go with this, right? I mean, the new head coach comes in, he fires everybody, puts together his own team, and that's the commander-in-chief's prerogative. You know, if he feels like I don't like you lack candor, maybe you lack what I consider moral courage. And again, I'm not taking anything away from any of these generals. I don't know them personally. I'm not like watching them. You know, I know some of my own commanders that became generals were some of the best commanders and people, hard-nosed, I've ever worked with. As a Marine general. So I don't know. But what I do know is that he's the head coach. He decides he wants to put his winning team together. He doesn't like this. I don't like that. These aren't my guys. I mean, people don't like it, but he can do it, and he did it. And so that's his prerogative. And if he doesn't like the way things were going, or he was observing and doesn't like the way decisions were made, or maybe a lack of candor, or maybe it was, lack of candor, or maybe it was yes man type behavior. And again, it's very hard when you're a general to speak truth to power to politicians. Okay. And so everybody understands that. You can and will be fired. You can get in a lot of trouble, all these different things. But at that level, one of the most important things, as I understand it, is that when you become a general, they say your candor, your clear candor, when you are testifying and you're speaking, that means you don't pull any punches. You got to tell them the way it is. That if unless they were speaking fully candidly and with full candor and transparency on record, then that's the job. That's the job. Just like for everybody else, the tactical guys, that's the job, to face the fire. The job is to get shot at and possibly die and get blown up and all the stuff that comes with it. And a lot of them, you know, the generals have probably done that too at some point in their career. But now when you're at that level and you take the rank, it's one of the first things they say, your candor is what we want from you. That's how they get sworn in. So they're reminded of that. And if at some point they just, you know, nod their heads and go along, and I'm not saying that everybody did that, but I'm saying if he feels that, he's the head coach. That's it. Bill Belichick, right? Okay, one of my friends, college teammates, played for Bill Belichick for 8 years. Okay, a lot of success. Broke his leg. They kept him on the team. He was a starter. He's on the All-Patriot team. Broke his leg. Got healed. He's like, okay, I'm coming back to my job. Sink. Cut him. Gone. Drew Bledsoe. You ever seen the roast for Tom Brady? I hate you, Tom. Right? Got injured. Sink. Gone. I mean, this is big boy rules. This is it. You know, so I would just be happy I became a general. I kept my rank, and you know, you serve at the pleasure of the president. He sends you on your way. It's the way it is. It's the way it goes. You know, people get shaken up. Hopefully, he puts a good team together that works for him and works for America, and that's it. That's my feeling.
Absolutely, absolutely. Peaches.
I kind of was waiting because I was trying to figure out the context of it. Because sorry, I had to hop out real quick. So I'm out of my element, Donnie.
No. So President Trump is calling for the firing of all the generals that were involved in the Afghan withdrawal debacle. All right. What are your thoughts on that?
Accountability, right? If and I said this earlier, I think on our show, if that was an E4, soldier, guardian, Coast Guard, airman or whatever, if that was an E4, that dude would be held accountable, and you would expect him to be accountable. Just like I expect our general officers, our O6s, our E9s, you get held accountable. You mess up, you do something like that, you botch it. Even if you are not a war fighter, even if you're not a strategic, like playing Axis and Evils kind of thing, like you should know that and totally look at the situation that happened and realize that that was botched. There's no way in hell that any of that should have gone down the way it did. And so somebody needs to be held accountable, and nobody has so far. Right. And I'm just, it's a double standard if nobody gets held accountable. And I think probably the E4 coming out of JD Vance is probably like, oh yeah, like you better go get him. And then the O4 coming out of Hegseth is like, yeah, man, I've seen plenty of O4s and majors get raked over the coals for a minor infraction. 13 Americans died during this, and they shouldn't have. And I think somebody needs to be held accountable for it. Also, we have a super chat too.
Shane, I know you spent some time in Afghanistan. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I still work on an intelligence group with, you might know Sarah Adams and others inside Afghanistan, monitoring what's going on there. My two big points on this. One is what's still happening in Afghanistan, what the withdrawal led to, and then the consequences. So there's around 80,000 trained Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters currently in Afghanistan. The Hamas fighters that attacked October 7 were trained in Afghanistan using US weapons in those attacks. They have a couple of their trainers, former Middle Eastern and/or Chechnyan special forces officers, couple trained in the US with US officers. They're getting much better in their CQB, their TTBs, their camps, but they are coming. Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, the Taliban at that leadership level have all come together as the new Islamic Army to come back in what they are calling 9/11 2.0. So the vacuum that was left in the botched Kabul evacuation has created a super Islamic army like we haven't seen. They sent 10,000 fighters to take Syria. So HTS and Jelani, that was supported completely from Afghanistan by Hamza bin Laden. Hamza bin Laden is married into Mullah Omar's family. They are all one now. And this is what's not known is what their next opportunity are. And a lot of this, they went to Saudi Arabia and the UAE and got pilots. Remember you initially saw them trying to fly the Black Hawks? They can fly Black Hawks now. And they have Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have given them money and parts to fix them. They've got, so they are, if you go to my Twitter account, I've put videos on there of their parades and their training grounds in Kandahar, in Uruzgan, and those places. So that's the biggest, for me, Five Eyes SOF are going to have to go back into Afghanistan and fix this mess because there's thousands of trained global jihadi soldiers there right now. And like I'll say it again, the Hamas fighters from 7 October trained in Afghanistan and used US weapons in Israel, in Gaza.
Well, I'm not looking to.
What?
Go ahead, Shane. Sorry. I said some little too soon. I mean,
so
I'm not looking to become one of the expendables, but can I become a drone pilot? Maybe just, I mean, maybe just saying. maybe I can help out.
So, yeah. So, and hey, so this is why, and if you watch some of what Sarah Adams and Legend and others on Sean Ryan have been talking about, we've been trying to illuminate this. We post about it all the time. There's actually a very good book about it with a full wide diagram of each village, how many soldiers are there, who's training. It's been fully unpacked. But my thing is, as a soldier, you're 100% right. Accountability. Who briefed the president? Who pushed back? When the president's, because it was symbolic. He wanted to get out on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Who did Mark Milley say, sir, that's great, but how about we leave Bagram? How about we leave this? How about we do this? With a small presence, we can do this. If they did that and POTUS said, I don't care, let's get it done. I'm not going to blame a general for following an order.
Right.
But if no one did a Stu Schiller at the Joint Chiefs, then they all need to go. If you just followed an order blindly, you're not really a leader. You know, a leader is someone to say, that's great, sir, but hang on, we don't really need to storm that machine gun. We can flank it or we can do some other things. What is your end state? What do you really want to be done? We can still give you the optics of pulling out of Kabul while we've got 10,000 troops and some SOF and some local assets. Like I had guys working OGA training the Afghan commandos that didn't know. They were literally in gun battles on that day going, what the hell is going on? So what was that decision-making process? That's where I want to see. Don't just fire people blanketly. This guy was fired because they did not push back on this. And Ben, as a former CEO, you'd be much better placed to explain about that pushback and that dichotomy of leadership than I am. But that's where I want the accountability. I want to know who was in the room, what was said and what wasn't said.
Absolutely.
Well
Absolutely.
Really well said, Shane.
Yes, let's hit that super chat and then we'll go to the next one.
From Grand Bear. What did Boris Johnson tell Zelensky back in April of 22 that he left peace talks? All casualties since are his fault. Yeah, I mean, this stuff could have been solved a long time ago. Completely agree.
Yeah. Like I said, hopefully.
Point, and I would have.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shane.
I would have agreed with you a month ago. Yeah, so I would have agreed with you wholeheartedly a month ago. But until speaking to the Ukrainians in Ukraine, it's not that easy. Like, to be honest, even if Zelensky said, that's it, there's no one, and I'm talking man, women, child, veterans, disabled veterans, like they don't want to give up. They don't see giving up. Giving up is not an option. And I was shocked at the resilience and resolve still inside of Ukraine today.
Yeah. What's the alternative, though? What's the alternative, though, man?
I mean, the alternative is a fight to the death, and that one wins, the other one loses. And so I think, that's, again, we go back to costs, and we go back to interests, and we seek, what are the interests? You want to restore your country to its original borders. Got it. What does that take to do it? It takes basically the U.S. to come in there and do it for you. That's what it takes. And we're not willing to do that. So then what do you have? That's kind of President Trump's point, is that you just didn't want to stop fighting in 2022 because I let you.
That's why I got,
Like, it's so easy to be a tough guy when the U.S. is backing you, or like when you're at the bar, like you're that supply guy and you got a bunch of operators with you. It's easy to go to a bar and start fights and start throwing your weight around because you got about 6 or 7 dudes. Even though they're not with you, they know of you and you support them. They're gonna jump in and make sure you're safe, right? So it's like once the U.S. is out of it, and now it's just Ukraine and Russia, and everyone else is just kind of standing by. Like, what's the alternative, man? Like, I hate to see the Ukrainian people in that position. I get it. They're resilient and they want to fight it out. But man, Russia's going to steamroll through that. They would have done it already if we weren't supporting them. And I don't want to see them in that position. But again, it's up to Zelensky as the leader of that country to make that call. Shane, please.
I have the same issue in Australia. There's a lot of politicians in Australia saying we need to not be so tied to the US militarily because we have like the ANZUS treaties and stuff. And I'm like, are you kidding? Do you not remember World War II? Like, without the US, we can't force project. We can't get outside our economic zone. Like, if China really do get their shit together and have a crack at Asia, without the Americans, we're speaking Chinese. Like, so it's not just, if you start following some Australian, especially going into an election, it'll be a topic. We're too close to the US. To me, as someone who's fought 4 wars and most of them with you guys, we can't be close enough.
Right.
Well, I agree with you, Shane. I would partner up with that and actually go, like, if the U.S. truly wants to be effective in the Pacific, it needs it needs Australia, it needs New Zealand, it needs Japan if we're going to be effective in the Pacific as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you deal with a whole separate value system that we're seeing in China and the way they view human rights and everything else. I mean, how do you think that war would go? I mean, this won't be it won't be the war we're used to. I mean, if you think about the billions of people, manpower, there's no shortage. Nate and I were talking about what a war, what soft role would be um, in a war with China. And the big thing we're talking about is regular warfare as well too, because even though they have so many people, they're not all uniform supporting the government either. So I mean, I just think with that big of a population, if they decide to open up a second front while we get entangled in a European World War II front, this is it's going to be epic world history level proportions of conflict. That will change probably the shape and organization of the world. So we probably want to avoid that as much as possible, which is I think what President Trump is trying to do. And he's elected to represent his own people and our own problems, and people in this country, capitalist country, want to make money, have good lives, and all that stuff. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind too, is as the global economic system lifts, the tide lifts all boats. I mean, same thing. Trade is what lifted China out of abject poverty over the past 20 years, right? And so they know that too. And the people that don't seem to care as much about it are the Russians, frankly, Vladimir Putin. So I mean, there's a lot going on here that's at stake. You could ruin the world economic system that was created after Bretton Woods in World War II. Global trade goes down. Trade routes are collapsing. Fidelity and belief in the trading system with economically oriented system with currency falls. I mean, we're really, really looking at some rough stuff. Of course, Bitcoin would go up, so that's not such a bad thing. But
it's crashing right now. Bye. Dude,
there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, so I was consuming some, again, World War II history, and I didn't realize, well, I knew of it, I just didn't know how bad it was. But back in the days, like, Japan was just steamrolling through China. Like, they fucking destroyed. They were horrible to them. So I can only imagine the disdain that those two countries share. Because Japan, back in the day, they were ferocious to the Chinese people.
Look up the rape of Nanjing. Look that up, and you'll see crazy blood sport stuff. I mean, they were having contests so you could cut off the most heads. Japanese officers were going to who could cut off the most heads of Chinese people with their sword. Crazy stuff. And
it's fucking horrible. And now the roles have reversed or have switched, right? Because we destroyed Japan, and then we literally, like, to your point, 20 years of trade have put China where they're at now because of us. And now they're our adversary, and we're worried about them, right? It's like when you study history, to you guys' point, it just opens your eyes as, man, a couple of 100 years ago, the world was completely different, right? China was not what it is now. It was fucking poverty everywhere. Russia, we saved their asses too. We saved everybody's asses, to Shane's point, right? But it just blows my mind.
With the World War II. Mm-hmm. So when the Japanese were buying all their oil, and because they don't have any themselves, and when the US put an oil embargo on Japan in like 1938, but the president didn't know it was done at the lower levels, and that's what forced Japan to actually start attacking other countries to get natural resources. So if that oil embargo never went in on Japan in 1937-38, and they could continue trading, there's a big question: would World War II in the Pacific even happen? But they attacked Pearl Harbor as a result of them going, the Americans are now stopping us getting oil and getting food and stuff. We need to strike the big dog. So you've got to play these actions out as we do wargaming. I just hope some of these politicians are doing the same, because history is repeating itself. I keep saying the world right now is where we were in 1938.
Yeah. And I'll say one thing too, for World War history, for everybody out there, and I'm sure many people are familiar with it, but as we say, America saved everyone's asses. I'll tell you, there's a big counter argument that makes a lot of sense. The Russians would tell you, no, we saved everyone. And here's why. They lost 20 million defeating the Wehrmacht. They lost 20 million people defeating Germany. Yeah, Battle of Stalingrad is the largest single battle in the history of the world. 1 million people killed. So
Damn.
think we lost. I mean, we can look it up how many we lost in World War II. Russia lost 20 million. I mean, you think about it, this is nuts,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, fighting the German army, they ground the German war machine down to a halt and chased them back
Yeah.
to Germany. The reason why we made a rush to get into Berlin, the Germans were terrified. They're terrified that the Russians were going to come and just, savage them, which they did. But the
Exactly.
Russians would argue that, and there's a lot of evidence to support what they'd say, that really who saved the world. I mean, America did his part, Five Eyes did his part, all this stuff like that, right? All the allies did. But, if it weren't for Russia, I don't know the sacrifices they made. So, just keep that in mind through all this as we discuss these things. The Russians are like, hey, what about us? You guys saved the world. What are you talking about? Do I have to remind you the numbers? Do I have to remind you what happened here?
So I'll echo Ben. Ben's 100% right there. And the other thing is, Nikita Khrushchev was in that battle, and Kennedy was in World War II and got injured, right? So they'd both seen war. So when you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, that's why they were so hell-bent on avoiding another war, because they'd seen the worst of it.
Yeah.
Have our leaders seen? We've seen war, right? But other guys making these decisions now, have they seen war? Have they seen that? Like Jocko talks, he was on Joe Rogan way back when, and he says, if you're going to go to war, you're going to kill people. Some innocent people. Look what's going on in Gaza now. Like, you're not going to get everyone, the right people. And that's what some of these policymakers, I think, don't take into consideration. So when we're looking at Ukraine and Europe and Asia, it's a nasty business. It's not something and I hope that these leaders, and that's why I like Pete Hegseth, he's been down and dirty. He's going to warn the president, sir, if this is going to happen, this is what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Shane, do you guys have any transgender troops in the Australian military? We're going to transition into our next topic.
It's a big turn.
I am led to believe there are some in the Air Force and Navy. I think, but it is not as widely spread. But we do have a ton of elevated DEI type female positions, but not to the same levels that you guys went.
All right. So we'll
that was a very he parried that. He blocked that. He's like, I'm not.
Well, Steve,
actually, I could have given you a better segue than that.
All right, we'll hit this next topic, guys, and then we'll wrap it up. Amazing discussion so far. Thank you, guys. So this article discussed the recent Pentagon memo indicating that the transgender service members in the U.S. militaries are to be identified and separated from service within 60 days. I don't know, man. I think they need more than 60 days.
Yep.
I don't know how I feel about this because, again, it's not their fault that they are where they are. It's the previous administration that allowed them to go through this process and allowed them to serve. And now to just say, hey, you got 60 days, get your shit together and get the fuck out. Like, I think they should have more time than that. And they should be, there should be a program established to make sure they're taken care of and make sure that they don't end up on the street to fucking kill themselves. Because at the end of the day, man, they're still soldiers, airmen, Marines, and Navy individuals. I think where there's such a quick reaction to just get them out without making sure that they're taken care of. What are you guys' thoughts on this? We'll go with you, Peaches,
so
and
Ben,
then we'll hit
correct
Ben.
me if I'm wrong. There's the main reason that Trump's made this decision is a lot of transgender people entered the military knowing that the military would pay for their surgery, got their surgery, then put their hand up and said, I'm injured or I've got PTSD to get out. And there's a lot that have done that. And I believe that that's what this reaction's about.
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I really.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything about that one. But either way, there's got to be, because we just got done talking about the Afghanistan debacle and just the rush to just get out of there without doing it the right way. There's got to be a better way to get these service members, right? Because at the end of the day, they're part of the military. There's got to be a better way to ease them out than to give them 60 fucking days. That's not a lot of time at all.
And it puts pressure on the organizations that already exist. So, okay, so you have Veteran Affairs, because they will have to see Veteran Affairs, right? And they should, for whatever reason, right? They still serve their country. They should be entitled to Veteran Affairs. They're TMO, like I don't know if it's TMO in the Army and the Navy, but like so they're still entitled to say it's Nellis Air Force Base, right? And here in Las Vegas, but they're from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and that's where they want to go. Well, now 60 days, that is like you can't even get a contracted vehicle in that amount of time and go through the process to get TMO. So like we are not setting them up for success. And I get it. It's a hot topic and maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I would argue like at least 120 days is probably what I would give them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is just sensational reporting and writing and just to get, and then behind the scenes, it's really like, 60 days to identify and begin the process and then get everybody out according to the normal process. Because here's the thing is that, and we all know too, the bureaucracy, how are they going to enforce this? How are they going to enforce it? They're going to be like, okay, yeah, that's great. 60 days. Okay, you're officially out. Now we'll do what we do, because they still have to run an organization. They can't helter skelter, just focus on these people and make sure they're out in 60 days. We've all had the nut show when the IG shows up or something like that, or some big inspection or some big dog and pony, and you're jumping through hoops. Real training goes away. Real focus goes away. You're trying to just do the hot topic of the day. That doesn't contribute to war fighting either. So I mean that's counter. Again, that's counter to good order and discipline and focusing on process and a repeatable, sustainable, sustainment of capabilities and growth of capabilities for war fighting. So I think I can see, just like you're saying, some way to start this process and get it going. But then, I mean, as long as the intent of it's being carried out, I can't see them saying, what are they going to do an inspection in 60 days? Bring them out. Where are they? Where are your transgender?
Drop your pants.
We're going to look around for them. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
what are they going to do?
Now, Shane just sent me a couple of articles that shows, yes, since 2020, hell, the Pentagon or the DOD has spent over $17.5 million in taxpayers' money to help treat these people, right? So again, people are gonna cheat the system. That's not the argument here, right? Because again, if you set a precedence that, hey, the military is giving out free fucking sex changes, everybody that wants a sex change is gonna show up, right? But I still don't think that's their fault. That's still the administration's fault. And the administration, whether it's the old one or the current one, should still be responsible to ensure they get a proper exit. Right, just like Afghanistan, right? Whatever administration was in charge at that time, George Bush started the conflict. He wasn't the one that ended it, but whoever was in charge still had the responsibility to make sure that it got done the right way. And that's all I'm saying. Shane, you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with anything you say, and they all need the proper care. All I'm saying is this is why the immediate freeze on recruitment and stuff is because. There was that evidence. So all those that are in are going to go through the VA system and get the appropriate care. But the immediacy of the order and decisions is based around that data that since 2020, transgender recruitment has doubled and all this extra stuff. So, so I get why in some ways the new Pentagon and the new administration's doing it. But I also completely agree 1,000,000% that all those that are veterans that have had it done, that have served, require, deserve, demand the proper care.
Absolutely.
And I think that's in keeping with the credibility of the armed forces and of our government, keeping our word. Everything you said before, Shane, about if we sign an agreement that you guys give up your nukes, we got your back, don't worry. And then we say, oh, well, I don't remember that. I mean, it's the same type of thing. We want people to get, this goes back to Max Weber. This goes back to, social scientists and the belief in systems, the belief in our laws. And none of these things work if people don't believe anymore. That's the fifth generation warfare you're talking about, how the Soviet Union and the Chinese are trying to undermine American belief in the system or Western belief in the systems. It's all up here. So if we undermine the mindset, we undermine our beliefs in these systems and our leadership, then nothing works. So I think, keeping our word when they say that, that, we keep our word. You come to the military. This is still, this is still the military. We still do things a certain way. Yes, you have to leave, but we're going to make sure, like we said, we are going to take care of you. We're going to honor our end of the agreement because the policy has changed, but that's not your fault. So I think it's important. I think it's important to still make this institution a very credible institution in the eyes of the American people. It's my opinion.
Absolutely.
Well, it's how they've done the reverse for the COVID. All those that got dismissed for not getting COVID jabs are now eligible to re-enter the military. So they've done the reverse on that policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, have you ever been in a room or been around a leader that everybody was so fearful of that they never went against him? And do you see that happening with President Trump? I can easily see scenarios where he is in a room and he's ditching out orders and no one is got the balls to say, wait, Mr. President, we can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen some things. I mean, like, stories and things I've personally seen, but leadership in the Marine Corps was pretty wild back in the day. I'm not going to lie. Some of the things I've seen and heard, but especially some of the stories I heard from people ahead of me too. Strength, rule by strength was a real thing. Calling people out in the bear pit, all that stuff. I mean, to be a leader, you couldn't just be like, today we're going to do this. I mean, this there's a little bit of well, show me what you're really made of type of thing as well. And so sometimes that's not good either. It's sometimes not good because it doesn't create good cohesion. So what I think with this is that here's my feeling on President Trump. I think if you get him alone, you don't threaten his ego, this goes for anywhere. Mm-hmm. You're going to get through to him. I think if you can get him alone, no cameras, alone, say, this is why. I'm telling you, this is why I don't agree. And again, basic for me, Marine Corps leadership, basic, military, basic soft, all those things. You can argue about it. You can discuss with it when the decision's made. Until new information comes up, you got to go with it. And then if new information comes up, you got to go to the boss. Unless it's absolutely urgent, life and blood, treasure, lives are on the line. You don't call them up and say, hey, dumbass, you're screwing it up. You know what I mean? It's like, you're getting a lot of people killed with that fucked up fire mission. Okay, that's real. If your fire mission's jacked up, you're getting people killed, then you got to yell it like that. But otherwise, the one-on-one behind closed doors or within the circle of trust where you can say, hey, you're being a dumbass right now. And you really have that trust with somebody. I think President Trump, that's the way they got to approach him. You can't do the Zelensky and be like, oh, I'm going to try and talk over you. He's like, what? I might not get what are you doing right now? He's gonna push back and fight that every time if you try to make him look bad. So I think those type of leaders, you have to play it that way. Could I see that happening? 100%. The one who probably has his ear, probably the most, has got to be JD Vance. It's got to be, or it's got to be one of his old advisors, that he trusts, maybe a family member. I don't know. But I think you're always in danger of that. Always. There's always a danger of that. I mean, you think that President Obama was very strong. People don't realize that. Crazy intelligent, analyzing everything, reading everything, very smart. And so you couldn't approach him that way either. You couldn't front him up either. You had to talk to him on the side. He'd ginsu your ass,
Absolutely.
So,
and it's no different than, because if you think about when you were a team leader, it's no different than your team sergeant, essentially try to big dick you in front of dudes, right? He would never fucking do that. And if you do, you would smash him. But instead, 100%. You guys go behind closed doors and you hash it out. I mean, I see it as the same 100%. Fucking concept at 100%. The lowest level, of course. But I was just curious, man, because I'm like, man, if they don't talk to him the right way, he's just gonna, hey, do this, and everybody's gonna be like, okay,
especially with all the cameras. And I think, yeah, that's right. That's a great comment. But especially though, President Trump said it many times. He said, why are you trying to do this with all the cameras? Why are you trying to do right now? You're making a big show. So we didn't see what happened before. We didn't, what I mean? We didn't see all the other stuff. We saw right then and there him trying to make all these declarations, proclamations, pushing and demanding, and and really taking almost like a bully pulpit. He was up on top of there, knowing he had the global audience, and he's trying to really push his narrative. And he called him out. Yeah. Got it. Okay. So, I guess, yeah, so Zelensky did not sign the mineral deal he said he was going to sign right before that. Okay. Even though he came there to sign it. And And so then you can imagine he blew the deal and then's trying to make a big deal, trying to use the power of the media to shape the agenda, swing popular support, which will put pressure on Trump. So he thought. He doesn't know him, obviously does not know who he's dealing with. I mean, the wrong guy to do it to.
Yeah,
And,
no shit, right?
What? Talk about not.
Out of everybody that you would do that to, you're going to do it to Trump? The guy's a master of media.
Yeah, after everything he's been through.
Whether you like him or not, right? Whether you think he's a fascist or whatever,
right?
The dude owns media. Like
wrong guy.
Yep.
So
hey, we do have a super chat that we didn't address.
Shane, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Sorry
Have a
about
look
that.
at who he picked in his first administration. Former generals Mathis and Kelly, and look at how that went down, how south that went. Look at who he's picked now, and
he's got E4s and O3s,
and how united. Yeah. Followers and uniters rather than
It's a great point. But I'll tell you though too, I think. There's a little bit of so many big dogs and big egos in the room. I mean, Secretary Mattis is a powerhouse, right? And he's going to listen, but he also has his own ideas. I don't know who has worked with him. I've worked with him before, and hats off to him. He's a brilliant strategist, war winner, all those things like that. He's badass as you think, all that. But, you're getting in the room with Trump, and then, I've seen power struggles with him and other leaders.
Absolutely. Peaches, we have a super chat we need to hit real quick.
Yeah, it was a while back, and I don't know, I'm having problems with the chat. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So Grand Bear, there were 200 to 250,000 Chinese killed because of the Doolittle raid. So that was based off of what we were talking about with Japan, I think.
Gotcha. Do we have any other ones, Aaron or Peaches, that you guys saw before we wrap this up?
By the way, the Doolittle raid was nuts. If you look that up, that's nuts. I think that's like crazy stuff, crazy land.
And to your point, Ben, I think like we really need more leaders like that are innovative and thinking outside the box. And I think that we would be farther along in our warfare capability if we didn't constrain people, and if we didn't have these colonels and general officers and senior enlisted that were scared to mess up, like. I tell you what, I bet if somebody like Doolittle came in now and said, listen, I want to do this, dude, he'd be like, all right, this dude is relieved from command for loss of confidence. Right. Am I wrong?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, what was the raid the Germans did? What was that? The again, not to talk about the enemy, but it was a brilliant tactical raid. It was an opening raid in the war where they flew like gliders in and special operations raid. We can look that up real quick. It's a German special ops.
You guys want to look up Operation Jaywick, Gaywick. You want to talk about special operations missions during the World War II? Australians canoed behind Japanese lines into Singapore Harbour and blew up 11 ships.
Oh, yeah.
Gangsters. Are you talking about Grand Sasso raid?
No, it's it's Otto Skorzeny, and he was flying in. I'm trying to think here. And maybe it was Grand Sasso. I don't think. Yes, it was the Grand Sasso raid. That was it. I mean, that's some crazy stuff, man. Some crazy stuff, right? Rescuing a world leader. Think about like hostage rescue and all that. That's next level.
We missed it, boys. We missed it.
Hey, I will give everything not to have been a World War II or World War I. All right, there was some crazy shit going on right there. I am glad 100%. We had Iraq and Afghanistan, and not
100%. I'm happy with my contributions.
We missed we missed the war.
Can you imagine? Going over the top of a trench at the Somme or World War I?
No, man, I'm good. Running through fucking
yeah.
How fast can you run? Yeah, as fast as a leopard. Let's see you do it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
No.
Bad news.
I'm good.
I mean, but we had the the anniversary of Iwo Jima. I'm just so happy I was never in that. Oh my God.
Dude, the Marines were
first day.
Oh
Killed.
man, I think the Marines probably had it worse during World War II, island hopping and fighting in those fucking man. I just watched not Bands of Brothers, but the other
Oh,
one,
the Pacific.
the Pacific.
Pacific.
I was
Crazy
like, oh
stuff.
my god, dude, I was
Crazy
like,
stuff,
fuck.
man.
I was like, I'm I'm glad I live in this era and not back then, because the shit those guys had to go to,
Insane,
Jesus
man.
Christ, fucking
I was-
Zelensky in that
I was
shit,
in
so we don't have
Fallujah.
to go through that again. Go
I was
Go
in
ahead, Shane.
Fallujah with the Marines. Time hasn't changed. I was in Fallujah with the Marines. Time hasn't changed. They still wind up in the shittiest spots.
Oh man, but well, I appreciate all you guys coming on, man. Shane, you specifically, man. I know this was last minute for you. I really appreciate you making the time to join us
Anytime.
on the panel today. Any last words? Anybody have anything else to say before we punch out? Aaron, thank you for the backside support again, and also working the chat. We appreciate you, brother. Peaches, appreciate you coming on after your procedure.
Hey, thanks to everybody who's watching and listening and all that. Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we'll see you again next Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening.
Later.
All right. See you, fellas.
Yep. Take care.
Great job, Aaron. Thanks, man.